The morning of my 41st birthday, I woke up to nothing. Not just an empty bed, but an actually empty house. Tammy had taken everything. The couch, the TV, the coffee maker, even the damn light bulbs were unscrewed from every fixture. The only thing left was my mattress on the bedroom floor and a folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. The week before my birthday, Tammy kept taking these weird phone calls. She would walk into another room, and I could hear her laughing about something. When she came back, she would look at me with this smirk and wink at our kids Milo and Magnolia during dinner. She kept saying things like, "Best birthday ever," under her breath, and he has no idea what's coming. I thought she was planning some surprise party. Our kids were acting strange, too, whispering with each other and giving me these looks like they knew something I didn't. Milo is 16 and Magnolia is 14, so I figured they were in on whatever surprise Tammy had planned. Man, was I wrong about what kind of surprise it would be. The note she left said, "Happy 50th, pathetic loser. My present is never seeing your face again." She couldn't even get my age right after 18 years of marriage. I'm 41, not 50, but I guess accuracy wasn't her priority when she was busy destroying my life. By noon that same day, Tammy was posting on Facebook Live from Las Vegas with some guy I had never seen before. She was wearing a new dress and jewelry I definitely hadn't bought her, talking about how she was finally free from her mistake of a marriage. The comments section was brutal. Her sister Connie wrote, "41 years old, still a minimum wage failure." Her dad Nelson commented, "Finally, my daughter escaped that loser." But the worst part was seeing my own kids join in. Magnolia posted on Instagram, "Bye-bye broke dad, hello rich stepdad," with a picture of her and this Vegas guy by a pool. Milo put up an Instagram story that said, "Mom went from rags to riches. Dad's still trash." Here's what they didn't know. I haven't worked minimum wage in over a decade. After Tammy's first affair 8 years ago, which she thought I never found out about, I started making some serious changes to my life. Not because I forgave her or wanted to save our marriage, but because I decided I would never be caught unprepared again. I went back to school, got my engineering degree, and landed a job at a major construction firm. I've been quietly saving money in accounts she never knew about. I bought property under an LLC she never heard of. I even started learning about divorce law and asset protection, just in case this day ever came. Because deep down, I knew it would. While Tammy was busy planning her grand exit with her new boyfriend, she made one critical mistake. She assumed I was still the same broke guy she married. She assumed I would be devastated and helpless. She assumed I had nothing without her. The truth is, I've been waiting for this moment for years. Every promotion I earned, every dollar I saved, every legal document I filed, it was all preparation for the day she would try to humiliate me again. She thought she was leaving me with nothing, but she actually just freed me to show her exactly what she had been underestimating all this time. I spent that first day walking through my empty house, actually smiling. Not because I was happy about my marriage ending, but because I realized Tammy had just made the biggest strategic error of her life. She had declared war on someone who had been preparing for battle for 8 years. My phone was buzzing with messages from her family and friends, probably expecting me to beg or cry or make some desperate attempt to win her back. Instead, I turned off my phone and called my lawyer, the same lawyer I had been quietly consulting with for the past 3 years just in case. Monday morning came, and I went to work like nothing had happened. My coworkers asked about my birthday, and I just told them my wife had given me an unexpected gift. That afternoon, I started making some calls of my own, not to Tammy or her family, but to a few key people who would help me with what came next. The funny thing about social media is how public it makes everything. Tammy's Vegas celebration was being broadcast to hundreds of people, including some very important ones she had forgotten about, like the family court judge who handles custody cases in our county, who happens to be friends with my boss, like the IRS agent who handles certain types of cases, who plays poker with my neighbor, like the credit monitoring services that flag suspicious activity when someone suddenly starts spending money they shouldn't have access to. By Wednesday, I had filed the paperwork I'd been keeping ready for years. Thursday morning, Tammy's Vegas vacation got its first interruption when the hotel informed her that the credit card she was using had been flagged for suspicious activity. Apparently, spending your spouse's money while publicly humiliating them online creates some interesting legal complications. Friday afternoon, my lawyer called to let me know that several institutions were very interested in reviewing some financial transactions that had occurred during my marriage. Transactions involving money that Tammy thought she had hidden, but that I had been quietly documenting since her first affair. I've spent 8 years preparing for this exact situation. While she was posting pictures of her new life, I was about to show her the consequences of underestimating the man she thought she could destroy. The best part? This was just the beginning of what I had planned. The real surprise party was about to start, and this time, I was the one who knew exactly what was coming next. Update 1. So remember how I said Tammy thought she was so clever leaving me with nothing? Well, turns out there are some things you can't just pack up and drive away with. Monday morning, exactly 3 days after my birthday disaster, my lawyer Curtis made his first move. See, while Tammy was busy taking selfies with her Vegas boyfriend and posting about escaping her loser husband, she forgot something pretty important. We own our house together, joint mortgage, both names on the deed. You can't just abandon a mortgage because you found a sugar daddy in Nevada. The calls started Tuesday around 10 a.m. First, it was Tammy, calling from some Vegas number I didn't recognize. She wanted to know why the bank was asking her about missed payments when the mortgage was supposed to be automatic. I told her that automatic payments require money in the account, and since she cleaned out our joint checking account, there wasn't exactly cash available for house payments. She started going on about how I needed to figure it out, how this was my responsibility too, how she shouldn't have to deal with this while she was trying to start her new life. The entitlement was unreal. This woman literally stole everything I owned 3 days ago, and now she's mad that there are consequences she has to think about. But here's where it gets interesting. Tammy's new boyfriend, Curtis, apparently makes decent money, but not enough to cover 2 mortgages. Because, surprise, he's still married too. His wife just hasn't figured out where he disappeared to yet. Tammy mentioned this little detail during our argument, probably thinking it made him sound more committed to her or something. Wednesday brought more calls. This time it was my kids. Milo wanted to know why his car insurance got canceled. The car insurance that I pay for, on the car that's registered in my name, that he drives. Apparently being in Vegas with mom and posting about his trash dad doesn't automatically transfer car ownership and insurance payments. Magnolia called crying because her phone got shut off. Turns out our family phone plan was under my name and tied to my credit card. The same credit card I canceled Monday morning when I realized Tammy had the number memorized and was probably planning to use it for her Vegas shopping spree. Both kids wanted to know why I was being so petty and vindictive. They kept saying their mom deserved to be happy, and I was just jealous that she found someone better. The irony is incredible. These are the same kids who publicly humiliated me on social media, and now they're confused why their dad isn't eagerly paying their bills while they celebrate his replacement. I explained to them that choices have consequences. When you decide your father is trash and publicly announce you're replacing him, you don't get to keep the benefits of having that father take care of your responsibilities. They wanted to argue about it, but I made it clear that if they wanted to be adults and make adult decisions about family loyalty, they could figure out adult responsibilities on their own. Thursday evening, Tammy called again. This time she was furious because the Vegas hotel was asking questions about her payment method. Apparently, Curtis's credit card was getting declined for some of their activities, and when they tried to use cash, the casino wanted to know where large amounts of money were coming from. See, here's something Tammy never understood about money. When you suddenly have access to funds you didn't have before, especially when those funds came from liquidating assets during a marriage, people start asking questions. Banks have reporting requirements. The IRS has rules about sudden financial changes, and when your spending is being documented on social media while you're publicly talking about leaving your husband, it creates what lawyers call a very clear paper trail. Tammy demanded to know what I had done, why everything was suddenly so complicated, why her perfect escape plan was hitting so many roadblocks. I told her I hadn't done anything except stop enabling her financial access to my life. Everything else was just the natural consequence of her own choices and the systems that exist to prevent exactly what she was trying to do. The conversation got heated fast. She accused me of sabotaging her happiness, of being controlling, of trying to trap her in a marriage she didn't want. I reminded her that she was free to leave anytime she wanted, but that leaving doesn't mean taking everything that isn't legally hers or avoiding the financial obligations she made as an adult. By Friday, the situation had escalated beyond what any of them expected. Tammy's sister Connie called to tell me I was being unreasonable and that families should stick together. The same sister who called me a minimum wage failure 3 days earlier. I asked her if she was willing to cover Tammy's half of the mortgage and car payments, since family sticks together. She hung up. But the real wake-up call came Saturday morning. Tammy's dad Nelson called, and his tone was completely different from his Facebook comment calling me a loser. Turns out Curtis isn't quite the wealthy catch they thought he was. His wife had figured out where he went and had some very interesting information about his actual financial situation. Nelson wanted to know if there was a way to work things out, if maybe we could have a reasonable conversation about the future. He kept talking about the kids and how family should come first. The same man who publicly supported his daughter's decision to humiliate me was now asking if we could be reasonable adults and figure out a solution. I told him that we absolutely could be reasonable adults, but reasonable adults don't steal from their spouses, don't publicly humiliate their partners, and don't abandon their financial responsibilities because they found someone new. If Tammy wanted to act like a reasonable adult, she could start by coming home and having an actual conversation about divorce instead of running away to Vegas and posting about it online. The weekend was quiet, but I knew it was just the calm before the real storm. Because while my family was busy figuring out that their grand escape plan had some serious flaws, I was preparing the next phase of my response. And unlike their impulsive Vegas adventure, my plans had been carefully thought out for years. Sunday night, I got a text from an unknown Vegas number. It wasn't Tammy. It was Curtis, Tammy's new boyfriend. He wanted to have a man-to-man conversation about the situation. Apparently, his own wife had started asking some very specific questions about his recent activities, and he was discovering that running away with another man's wife creates complications in his own marriage. The text said he thought maybe we could work something out, maybe find a solution that worked for everyone involved. He suggested we talk like reasonable men, instead of letting the women make this more dramatic than it needed to be. I stared at that text for a long time. This man had helped my wife steal my belongings, had been featured in her social media posts humiliating me, had been part of turning my own children against me. And now, he wanted to have a reasonable conversation because his perfect plan was causing problems in his own life. I knew exactly what my response would be, and it wasn't going to be the reasonable conversation he was hoping for. Update 2. Reddit. You guys are not going to believe what happened this week. Remember how I said I had been preparing for this moment for 8 years? Well, Sunday morning was when I finally got to show everyone exactly what that preparation looked like. Curtis called me back after his conversation with his wife, Geraldine. Didn't go the way he planned. This time, he wasn't trying to sound reasonable or friendly. He was angry and demanded to know what I had told his wife about their Vegas trip. Apparently, Geraldine had asked some very specific questions about his recent credit card statements and travel expenses. I told Curtis I hadn't spoken to his wife at all. I didn't need to. When you publicly broadcast your affair on social media while using joint financial accounts, you create a paper trail that speaks for itself. His wife wasn't stupid. She just needed to see the obvious patterns that were right in front of her. Curtis started yelling about how I was ruining his life, how this wasn't my business, how I needed to stay out of his marriage. The irony was incredible. This man had been sleeping with my wife for months, helped her steal my belongings, and encouraged my children to humiliate me online. But somehow, I was the one crossing boundaries by not hiding his behavior from his own wife. I explained to Curtis that his life wasn't my responsibility. My responsibility was protecting my own interests and making sure my family understood the consequences of their choices. If his marriage became collateral damage in that process, maybe he should have thought about that before getting involved with someone else's wife. Monday brought the most interesting development yet. Tammy showed up at my house with both kids, but this time they weren't visiting. They had luggage. Apparently, Curtis had to go back home to deal with his wife's situation, and Tammy couldn't afford to stay in Vegas without his financial support. Tammy tried to frame this as a temporary arrangement while she figured out her next steps. She said she wasn't asking to reconcile, just needed a place to stay until she could find her own apartment and get back on her feet. She promised it would only be for a few weeks, maybe a month at most. The kids were clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. Milo kept looking around at the empty house they had mocked on social media just a week ago. Magnolia was quiet and seemed embarrassed about having to come back to the place she had publicly called a dump compared to Curtis's lifestyle. I told them they were welcome to stay, but that staying meant following the house rules I had established for myself over the past week. No outside boyfriends spending the night. No social media posts about our family business. No taking things that belong to me without asking first. Tammy immediately started arguing about the boyfriend rule, saying I couldn't control who she saw or where she spent her time. I agreed completely. She was free to see whoever she wanted, but she couldn't bring them into my house or expect me to financially support her relationship with them. The argument escalated quickly. Tammy accused me of being controlling and vindictive, of trying to punish her for being honest about her feelings, of making the kids suffer because of adult problems. She said I was being petty, and that real men don't hold grudges about relationship issues. I reminded her that real women don't steal their husbands' belongings while publicly humiliating them and encouraging their children to join in. I pointed out that every consequence she was facing was the direct result of choices she had made, not punishments I had created. Milo tried to mediate by suggesting we could all just get along until the divorce was finalized. He said fighting wasn't helping anyone. and that we should focus on being a family even if mom and dad weren't together anymore. Magnolia agreed, saying she just wanted things to go back to normal. That's when I realized my kids had no idea what normal actually meant. They thought normal was having everything provided for them regardless of how they treated the person providing it. They thought normal was being able to publicly humiliate someone and then expect that person to continue taking care of their needs. I spent Tuesday evening having separate conversations with both Milo and Magnolia. I explained that I loved them and would always be their father, but that respect and loyalty aren't optional in families. I told them that adults face consequences for their actions, and part of becoming adults themselves meant understanding that relationships require effort from both sides. Milo argued that he was just supporting his mom during a difficult time, that he didn't mean the things he posted online, that he was confused and angry about the divorce. He said he wanted to have a relationship with both me and Curtis, and didn't understand why that couldn't work. Magnolia was more direct. She admitted that Curtis had been giving her money and gifts, and that she was worried about losing that support if I made things difficult. She said her friends thought Curtis was cool, and that having a wealthy stepdad would be better for her social status at school. These conversations helped me understand exactly what I was dealing with. My children hadn't just been caught up in their mother's drama. They had been actively participating because they saw financial benefit in replacing me with someone who had more money to offer them. Wednesday morning, Tammy found the divorce papers that had been filed the previous Friday. She had been served properly while she was in Vegas, but apparently hadn't read them carefully. When she finally looked at the asset division and custody arrangements I was requesting, she realized that her week-long vacation had been more expensive than she thought. The house she had abandoned was solely in my name now, thanks to a refinancing I had done 2 years ago. The cars she thought we owned together were actually leased through my business. The college funds she assumed would support the kids were in accounts she had no legal access to. Tammy demanded to know when I had made all these changes, why I hadn't told her about them, how I could have been planning this while we were still married. She accused me of being deceptive and manipulative, of setting traps instead of being honest about our relationship problems. I explained that I hadn't set any traps. I had simply prepared for the possibility that she might leave again, the same way she had 8 years ago during her first affair. Every financial decision I made was legal and documented. Every asset protection strategy I used was standard practice for people who want to secure their future. The difference between us was that I had learned from experience while she had assumed nothing would ever change. Thursday evening, Curtis called again. This time, he wasn't demanding or threatening. He wanted to know if there was any way to undo some of the legal complications that were affecting both his marriage and his relationship with Tammy. He offered to pay for counseling, suggested we could work out some kind of arrangement, even hinted that he might be willing to step back from the situation if it would help resolve everyone's problems. But it was too late for reasonable conversations. While they had been planning their public humiliation strategy, I had been preparing for every possible outcome. Friday morning would bring the final phase of consequences they had created for themselves, and unlike their impulsive Vegas adventure, my response had been carefully planned for years. The phone calls I had been waiting for were about to start, and this time they wouldn't be calling to demand or negotiate. They would be calling to beg. Final update. Reddit. This is the final update, and honestly, it's been the most satisfying 2 weeks of my life. Remember how I said Friday morning would bring the calls I had been waiting for? Well, I was right about that. It started with Tammy finding the documents my lawyer had filed regarding the business assets. Turns out, while she was busy planning her Vegas escape, I had been busy transferring ownership of several properties and investment accounts into an LLC that predated our marriage. All legal, all documented, all completely outside the scope of marital assets. Tammy stormed into my home office Friday morning, demanding to know how I could have hidden assets from her. She was waving papers around and yelling about how this was fraud, how she was entitled to half of everything, how she was going to take me to court for deception. I calmly explained that I hadn't hidden anything. Every document she was holding had been filed with the appropriate government agencies and was part of the public record. The LLC she was so upset about had been established 3 years before we even met, when I inherited some money from my grandfather. I had simply been adding to those investments over the years with money that was never part of our joint finances. The look on her face when she realized what this meant was priceless. All those years she had been calling me a minimum wage loser. I had been building a financial foundation that she had no legal claim to. The house she abandoned? Mine. The successful business I had built? Mine. The investment portfolio she never knew existed? Also mine. But the real conversation we needed to have was about the kids. Both Milo and Magnolia had been living in my house for a week, eating my food, using my electricity, sleeping in beds I provided, all while maintaining their social media presence celebrating Curtis as their new father figure. Saturday morning, I sat them both down for the conversation I had been planning for years. I explained that being an adult means making choices and living with the consequences of those choices. They had publicly chosen Curtis over me, and I respected that choice. But choices work both ways. Milo immediately started backtracking, saying he didn't mean what he posted online, that he was just supporting his mom, that he still wanted me to be his dad. He talked about how confusing everything had been, how he felt caught in the middle, how he just wanted the family to be happy again. Magnolia was more honest. She admitted that Curtis had promised to pay for her college and buy her a car, and that she was scared about losing those opportunities if she chose my side. She said her friends thought Curtis was cooler than me, and that having a wealthy stepdad would be better for her social status. I appreciated their honesty, and I told them both that I understood their reasoning, but I also explained that integrity isn't something you can turn on and off, based on what's convenient. They had made their choice publicly, and with full knowledge of what they were doing. I wasn't going to pretend that hadn't happened just because the financial benefits weren't working out the way they expected. The conversation lasted for hours. Both kids tried every argument they could think of. They said I was being unfair, that parents should love their children unconditionally, that I was punishing them for their mother's decisions. They promised to do better, to be more respectful, to choose me over Curtis going forward. But here's what they didn't understand. This wasn't about punishment or choosing sides. This was about learning that relationships require mutual respect and loyalty. For 8 years, I had been preparing for the possibility that my family would abandon me again. Now that it had happened, I was finally free to build the life I actually wanted, instead of the life I was trying to save. Sunday brought the call I had been waiting 8 years to receive. Tammy's voice was different this time. Not angry or demanding, but genuinely desperate. She wanted to know if there was any way we could work things out. If maybe we could try marriage counseling. If I would consider giving her another chance. Curtis had gone back to his wife and was trying to save his own marriage. The divorce he had promised Tammy wasn't happening. The financial support he had offered was disappearing as his wife took control of their joint assets. The Vegas lifestyle she had posted about on social media was ending, and she was realizing that she had gambled away 18 years of stability for a week of fantasy. Tammy tried every approach she could think of. She apologized for the way she handled the separation, promised she could change, talked about all the good times we had shared over the years. She offered to do whatever it took to rebuild trust, suggested we could start over fresh, even said she would be willing to sign a post-nuptial agreement giving me more control over our finances. But the most interesting part of the conversation was when she started talking about practical concerns. Where would she live if I divorced her? How would she support herself without access to our joint accounts? What would happen to her relationship with the kids if she couldn't provide for them the way Curtis had promised? For the first time in our entire marriage, Tammy was being completely honest about her motivations. She hadn't left me because she found true love with Curtis. She had left me because she thought Curtis offered better financial security and social status. Now that those benefits were disappearing, she wanted to come back to the stability she had abandoned. I told her I appreciated her honesty, but that her honesty also proved exactly why our marriage couldn't be saved. She had spent 18 years with me while secretly evaluating whether someone better might come along. She had raised our children to value financial status over family loyalty. She had publicly humiliated me the moment she thought she found a better option. Monday morning, I made the decision I had been preparing to make for 8 years. I accepted Tammy's request for divorce and agreed to her terms for asset division. She could have half of the marital assets we had accumulated together, which honestly wasn't very much since I'd been building my real wealth outside of our joint finances for years. But I also made it clear that rebuilding any kind of relationship with me or the kids would require more than just admitting she made a mistake. It would require understanding why she made that mistake and taking responsibility for the values she had taught our children. The kids took the news differently than I expected. Milo was relieved that the uncertainty was finally over, even though it meant accepting that his parents wouldn't be getting back together. Magnolia was angry and blamed me for not trying harder to save the family. But both of them slowly started to understand that their father wasn't the weak, broke loser their mother had convinced them he was. Over the following weeks, as they saw how I handled the divorce proceedings and how I managed my actual financial situation, they began to realize they had been manipulated into betraying someone who had been quietly taking care of them their entire lives. The final irony came a month later when Curtis called me one last time. He wanted to apologize for his role in destroying my marriage and to let me know that he and Tammy weren't together anymore. His own wife had taken him back on the condition that he cut all contact with Tammy and go to marriage counseling. He said he realized he had made a huge mistake and that he hoped I could forgive him someday. He talked about how he had been going through a midlife crisis and had made terrible decisions that hurt everyone involved. I told Curtis that his apology was unnecessary. He hadn't destroyed my marriage. He had simply revealed what my marriage actually was. If anything, I should probably thank him for forcing a situation that showed me exactly where I stood with my family and gave me the motivation to finally build the life I deserved. 3 months later, I'm living in a house I own completely, working at a job I love, managing investments that provide real financial security. My relationship with my kids is slowly rebuilding based on mutual respect instead of financial dependence. And for the first time in 8 years, I'm not preparing for betrayal because I'm finally free from people who were never really committed to me in the first place. The best part? Tammy's Facebook is no longer full of posts about escaping her loser husband. These days, she's posting about looking for a new place to live and asking friends if they know of any job openings. Turns out, when you publicly burn bridges with the person who is quietly providing your stability, you have to figure out how to build your own life from scratch. I just smiled and waited. And now I know exactly what I've been waiting for all these years. The opportunity to finally live life on my own terms, surrounded by people who choose to be there because they actually want to be, not because they're evaluating better options.